so sorry. We're going to switch this up real quick so Commissioner Gidge doesn't have to stay up here awkwardly. We would like to read a proclamation. Would you like to read it? I'll read it, doesn't matter?
Either way.
Okay, I'm excited to read it.
Such an honor.
Can we see, Gidge? Here we go over here. We're not doing this very well for the photos, for the cameras. Over here. Right here.
I can always share photos from this angle.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oops, gotta go microphone. Maybe I'm gonna go around in front and then he can. Yeah, good boy. Here you go. Whereas Missoula County held a contest in August 2022 at Missoula County Voice to elect its first ever pet commissioner to provide a fun way for residents to engage with and learn about local government. And whereas competition in the contest was fierce, with more than 59 candidates that included cats, dogs, a frog, a cow, a chicken, and chinchilla. And whereas these candidates ran on diverse platforms and a myriad of campaign promises, which included advocating for the county's parks, trails, and open lands, providing pet pantries around the county stocked with food, treats, water, leashes, and bringing awareness to endangered and extinct animals, and promising cross-species collaboration. And whereas following an intense campaign season, Gidge, the tripod, a three-legged border collie, beat out the competition with 174 votes. And whereas Gidge lost his right front leg as a puppy and was abandoned at only 1 year old, he was the last dog at the shelter when his owner adopted him from Missoula Animal Control in 2020, Katie Connolly. And whereas Gidge is a certified therapy dog with many other accolades to his names from dog training at centers, and despite being differently abled, Gidge has lived a happy, fulfilling life with 3 legs, and seeing him running around helps other dog owners make the decision to amputate and rehabilitate when faced with a difficult health diagnosis. And whereas as pet commissioner, Gidge will work to give tripods more visibility so more pets may have a chance to live happily on 3 legs. And Gidge will also work with Missoula County to raise awareness of the importance and benefits of pet owners registering their doggos with animal control, as well as other issues relevant to Missoula County pets. And whereas we have full confidence that Gidge will proudly represent the floofy puppers, chunky cats, and all other feathery, furry, and scaly babies of Missoula County. Therefore, be it resolved that we, the Missoula County Commissioners, hereby proclaim Gidge the tripod as Missoula County's first ever pet commissioner, and that he is such a good boy. Yes, he is. Yes, yes, he is. Hi, Gidge. Yes, you're such a good boy. Well, Katie, thank you.
Would you like to say anything?
Do you want him to hang out up there?
Whatever makes him comfortable. Yeah. Yeah, well, Katie, do you want to share a little bit about the importance of his work? Yeah. And maybe your story? There's a microphone right there, yeah.
Did not expect this. We have nothing prepared. Oh, is it not on? All right. So in addition to his new position as county commissioner, which clearly he's taking very seriously by the look on his face right now, he is also an ambassador for the Tripod Foundation, which helps people find funding in order to amputate and rehabilitate instead of euthanize. Keeps more dogs with us longer. Who doesn't want more puppies in the world? So doing lots of good work there. He has more qualifications if he had a LinkedIn than I would, or than most people in this room. I'm sure. He volunteers at the University of Montana. He is a registered therapy dog there, so he's next going to be there on October 24th at the Davidson Honors College, if anyone wants to say hi to him then. He helps me find morel mushrooms because he's trained in nose work. He's trained in advanced dog agility. He has his Canine Good Citizen. Like, the list, I'm sure I'm forgetting things, just keeps going on. So we'll see what he does next. Given the amount of interest in him that this election has brought to light, he now very newly has social media. So if anyone wants to follow his exploits throughout Big Sky Country, you can follow him at CGidge Run. Or you can be his friend on Facebook. He's just Gidge the Tripod there. So.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Do you think it's an overstatement or an inaccuracy to say that this is the first such commissioner that we have in the state of Montana?
I believe
First
so.
pet commissioner in the state of Montana. So yes. Tip of the-
Congratulations, Gidge.
Thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I feel bad if he's very patient. Do you want to get down?
We actually want to go take some photos out in front of the courthouse with him.
Okay, okay. Off to do a photo shoot, Gidge. Yeah.
Press engagement.
Good boy.
You don't want to leave? Yeah, get down. Oh. Here, he's here.
Oh, is he gonna jump? Okay.
We're not going to have him jump.
Yeah. Great to meet you, Gidge. Thank you so much. We look forward to working with you.
We look forward to looking for morel mushrooms next spring.
Yes.
Lovely to meet you all.
Okay.
Thank
take
you.
care.
He doesn't seem to know what's missing.
And then we have a second proclamation.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Whereas September 15th marks the independence from Spain for a number of Latin American countries, including Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, followed by Mexico on September 16th, Chile on September 18th, and Belize on September 21st. And whereas Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx are pan-ethnic terms used to encompass people of South America, Central America, or other Spanish cultural origins, regardless of race. And whereas National Hispanic Heritage Month began in 1968 as Hispanic Heritage Week and grew up to a 30-day observance in 1988 to recognize and honor the diverse people and rich histories, cultures, and legacies that have Hispanic and Latin roots. And whereas between 2010 and 2020, the Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx population accounted for 51% of the United States population growth of 22.7 million, and whereas the national growth of the United States Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx population is reflected in Missoula County, with 3.4% of Missoula County residents identifying as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and or Latinx, representing Missoula County's largest racial and ethnic demographic, keeping in mind that people of Hispanic and Latin ancestry can be racially white, and whereas more than 20 million people who identify as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, or Latinx represent multiple ethno-racial, geographic, and other intersecting social identities. And whereas Missoula County celebrates the culture, life experiences, and perspectives that this diverse population brings to our community, while also acknowledging the inequities that exist. And whereas, in the words of revolutionary Mexican painter Frida Kahlo, at the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can. Now, therefore, be it resolved, we, Missoula County and the city of Missoula, do hereby proclaim September 15th through October 15th, 2022, as Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month, to celebrate the freedoms won by people in many Latin American countries and to honor the rich Hispanic, Latino, Latina, and Latinx cultures and histories that have shaped our country and community, dated the 6th day of October, 2022.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Anyone like to speak to this? Or to anything on the agenda or not on the agenda? Okay. Looks like we have our current claims list. as of September 20th, 2022 to September 27th, 2022 by the Commissioner's Office totals $2,132,845.81. We have 5 hearings, and apologies, I have to leave at 3, and Commissioner Strohmeyer will chair. When I leave, we'll begin with our first hearing. So Sam Scott, request a rename to portion Running W Road with Meadowlands Drive. Meadowlands Drive is much kinder than Running W.
Good afternoon. Sam Scott with the Clerk and Recorder's Office. So like you said, a request has been submitted to our office to rename a portion of Running W Road located in sections 21 and 22, Township 14 North, Range 20 West, within and adjacent to the subdivision known as Running W Ranch Subdivision. The request is to rename the portion of the road to Meadowlands Drive so as to match more closely to the new name of the remaining subdivision phases, Missoula Meadowlands. The request includes the signatures of all landowners whose addresses will be affected. A notice of this hearing has been published in the Missoulian, and the affected landowners have been notified. I'm not sure if the requester is here today, but I believe their representative may have joined us online. So if Jamie has anything to say, otherwise the request is presented to you for your decision.
Thank you. Jamie?
Thank you, Ann. No additional information from me. Just thanks to Sam for all the work you did on this.
Josh or Dave, do you have, or is there public, anyone else have anything to comment or say about this? I don't have
Okay,
anything.
I do not either, if we're ready for a motion.
I'm happy to move, we make the change.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you. Okay, Shane Stack with a, oh, sorry, Jamie. Nope, okay, Shane Stack with no parking resolution for North Avenue, just east of 29th Avenue.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. To recall, on September 15th, we opened the public hearing to consider a no parking zone. And maybe I'll share my screen and kind of give you an idea of where this is located. Can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this gives you an idea of what that parking zone would look like. Let me quickly kind of pan out here. Just to orient you to the area, this is the Big Sky High School campus here at the end of West Central. And if you drive down from there and hit the intersection of 29th and go north, there's this little section of North Avenue. And that was recently reconstructed through the efforts of our County Public Works staff and of course funded by the neighborhood. And you can kind of see this drawing here of what this might look like today. I don't have an aerial photo with the updated construction efforts, but this is kind of the plan effort that was put forward. But gives you an idea of why we need a no parking area or a no parking resolution in this area or a restriction. Essentially, we need to be able to get our plow trucks turned around or emergency vehicles need to be turned around. I think once you're past that, if folks are parking along either one of these roadways, I think we'll be fine, getting around those vehicles. But I think for right now, what we're recommending is a no parking restriction just for the end here, just to make sure we can get vehicles turned around. We did have a couple comments. Patty Chevalier commented. She lives in this house here at the end, which she'd have a no parking restriction in front of her house. And she did share comments, and I don't know if she's on today, but I can kind of paraphrase that she kind of was concerned about parking along the remainder of 29th and North, and that, concerned that we may not be able to do winter maintenance. Had a few other comments that are in the packet from her. And then we did have another comment as well from Deb, who lives a across the roadway, and really was just more of a question about, do we have, parking restrictions at night, and we do in locations, but I think it was more of a general question, and I think I just answered her question. So those are the comments I've received since we've had the hearing opened on September 15th. That kind of concludes my update. I don't know if you guys have questions.
Is there anyone in Sophie Moise who'd like to comment or speak to this? Yeah, come on up.
So I live in this neighborhood.
And oops, sorry, can you give us your name, please, just for the record? Yeah.
Nancy Eiler.
Okay. And is your microphone on? Oh, okay, thanks.
So I live in this neighborhood as well, and we're very grateful to the county for being able to provide us with the opportunity to have an RSID and to get road work done on our street, which was previously dirt and now is nicely paved. That's a wonderful thing. And we're also very grateful that there's been an offer from the county to plow for us in the winter now that it's a county road. And so I can only speak for myself, although I'm somewhat familiar with other neighbors' feelings, that we just think it's important to make sure that the road, especially the cul-de-sac, can remain clear so that plows can turn and emergency vehicles can turn, so that we can have plowing and we can have access for emergency vehicles. So I think the neighborhood feeling is that we think the no parking resolution is really helpful so that we can have those things occur.
Thank you. Would anyone else in Sophie Moise like to speak? And Violet, I can't tell if there's anyone on line. Okay. Josh or Dave, this is kind of in your neighborhood, Josh.
Yeah, I'm really familiar with this, and I think Shane did a great job summarizing the situation. And I think I think we should head this direction.
I'll second that.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Okay, Shannon Terrio, first hearing to readopt a health code by reference.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to share my screen.
Thanks.
I hope. Sorry. Okay, I am here to talk, to ask you to readopt the Missoula Health Code and associated fees by reference. In 2021, the legislature changed the authority of the health board, and instead of the health board adopting regulations, it requires that the health board propose regulations to the local governing bodies and have them adopt the regulations. And so we have been here a couple of times. In April 2021, the county commissioners approved an emergency ordinance, and then in June of 2021 adopted the health code by reference. Then we came back in March to ask you to adopt some revised fees. And the reason why it was always the county that was doing that is that the legislation said that the county commissioners were the local governing body to approve the changes or the health code until an interlocal agreement establishes a different local governing body. And so we did the last time that, well, all times, I guess, there was an expiration that was put into this adoption by reference. And I do believe, so it said that it would expire 90 days after the city and the county execute a new interlocal agreement, which has happened. And so now I am back again because what we have adopted by reference will expire. Likely, the reason that we have that in there is because of the jurisdiction section. So the existing ordinance says that it applies to all of Missoula County, but the interlocal agreement has some contingencies in it. And so the new proposed ordinance would mirror the language in the jurisdiction in the interlocal agreement, which would be that it applies to all of Missoula County unless the city council fails to adopt all or a portion of the health code, and that in the event that the county and the city don't work it out, which is the plan, that you would work together to come up with one agreed upon rule, then if that doesn't happen, then the county ordinance would apply only outside the city limits. State law does allow you to adopt health codes by reference, and this is just 76108, and we're following that process. So we have talked about this before, and I'm not going to go into detail about everything that's in the health code, except to say that I want to acknowledge, what the regulations are that are in the health code. So we have an administrative section. We have Regulation 1, which is our wastewater treatment and disposal systems or septic systems. We have a large group functions, requires permits for large group functions, solid waste management. Regulation 4 is about food service establishments. Regulation 5 is drinking water well protection, that requires well permits and that wells are drilled where they are approved or at least 100 feet away from septic systems. We have a Regulation 6 that's about drop-in childcare facilities because that's not covered in state law. We have Regulation 7 for rabies control, has to do with our dog ordinance, the county dog ordinance. And so it works hand in hand with that. And then we also have Regulation 8, which is trailer court and campgrounds. And then we have the health code associated fees. So when you adopt something by reference, it does have to, of course, be available to the public for inspection so that they can look at it and have comments on it. It is available and has been available on our website. The easiest way to get there is to Google Missoula Health Code and you'll get there. It's also available by email, and it has been recorded with the clerk and recorder as required by the law. So we are asking that you approve the first reading and provisional adoption of the resolution and ordinance approving the Missoula City County Health Code and associated fees by reference, and there will be then a second hearing in a couple of weeks for hopefully final adoption.
Dave, you had asked earlier today, can you give us again the definition of by reference, or what does that mean?
And maybe if you're doing that, Shannon, contrast that to what we would, if we were not adopting it by reference, what would we be adopting here today?
Okay, great. I can do that. So basically, adopting by reference means that there's a code that's published somewhere else, and you're saying we're going to adopt that whole thing. And by adopting it, you are putting it into action. You are approving it. And so if you weren't adopting it by reference, you would basically have a county ordinance that would look like the health code. It would have all of the words in the health, you would be adopting what I was showing you before, which was an administrative section, regulations 1 through 8, and fees, but it would all be spelled out in an ordinance as opposed to it being a package that you're adopting.
So it sounds like it's more a matter of how we'd still basically be adopting the same thing, but it would be presented in a different format.
That's right.
Sort of.
That's right. Yeah, and there's some confusion. I mean, the health code is the way that we're used to managing our regulations and enforcing and implementing our regulations, and so it kind of keeps that health code as an entity. Otherwise, what we would have is we would have a county ordinance about all these different health regulations and a city ordinance about all these different health regulations.
So now this is the entire code for both governing
Right.
bodies.
And so what I haven't said yet is because the interlocal changed, even though more than likely, what we would have to do by law is take any changes to the city council. We're going ahead and asking the board to adopt a resolution, asking the city council to also adopt it by reference. And so that we have the health code will be adopted both. It's like being approved, right? It'll be approved by the city council and it'll be approved by the county commissioners. And so that's, instead of having a separate city ordinance and a separate county ordinance with all the same words, what you're doing is you are approving the health code.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there any other questions or comments? Okay.
Shannon, can you
Oh.
bring the motion back up again?
Yes. Yes, I can. I just got out of it. There you go.
Okay, I'd move that we approve the first reading and provisional adoption of the resolution and ordinance approving the Missoula City County Health Code and associated fees by reference.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tim Worley with the Creighton, I'm sorry, am I mispronouncing that? Creighton Major
You're
Subdivision?
correct, Juanita, yeah, you're correct. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim Worley, Senior Planner with the Planning Office, Planning Development and Sustainability. And at the request of Montana Northwest Company, we recommend opening the Creighton subdivision hearing and then provide an opportunity for public comment. And then we would recommend the continuing of this hearing to December 8th based on some channel migration zone study related information that Montana Northwest and some other contractors are working on related to the subdivision.
Thank you. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this proposal? Or this proposed timeline? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm good with extending it.
Yep, me too.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you so much, Tim. December 8th.
Thanks, Commissioners.
Thank you.
Roller coaster subdivision with Jenny Dixon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. And I'm glad that, I have to say, I'm selfishly glad that the last 4 hearings went so quickly because I'm glad to have you here, Juanita. This is my first subdivision for about 15 years. So IMEG has been
Welcome back.
very, very patient and understanding with me. So my name is Jenny Dixon. I'm a planner with the Planning Development and Sustainability Department, and this is a minor subdivision proposed by Roller Coaster Road LLC and represented by IMEG. The location of the property is out near the Y. It's on Roller Coaster Road on the north side of the road, and make sure, can you see my? Yes, you can. It's not very big, but the property is just here on the north side of the road, only about a quarter mile from the Highway 10 intersection. And it gives you, this picture on the left gives you the context with the Y up north, and between this property and the Y interchange is an industrial park. And then the picture on the right zooms in a little bit and shows you the context that the property sits in, adjacent to some residential, large tract residential properties, and then across Highway 10, some industrial, light industrial uses. The property was just zoned in July of this year to industrial center light. It was previously also light industrial. It was a kind of a a like-for-like conversion zoning. So it's been zoned light industrial for some time. The property is within the airport influence area, and as is required by the FAA, the subdivider will need to grant a navigation easement to the airport, and that's very standard. It is a condition of approval, not at all unusual. So again, here's a context photo, but I wanted to put it in context of a subdivision that you approved last summer, Pontiac subdivision on the south side of Roller Coaster Road. I am going to want to just talk about that briefly here towards the end of my presentation, but just to give you some further context of this proposed subdivision and Pontiac. And I put this in just for fun because I think Google Earth is really fun and shows you the aspect of, and it clearly demonstrates that this property has been used for agricultural purposes in the past. You can see some riparian area over to the, well, it's to the east, and then over to the west and across Roller Coaster, you've got some riparian, but you really don't have any riparian area on this property. And again, running along the north property boundary is the railroad, and this is Highway 10, and this is Roller Coaster Road. So this is a 5-lot subdivision on about 11 acres. The applicant proposes to connect to city sewer and provide individual wells on each property. The property fronts on the south to Roller Coaster Road, and I've included a photo here. It's a little older photo, but really hasn't changed much out there of what Roller Coaster Road looks like. And then the on-site road proposed for the subdivision is a cul-de-sac road to serve the 5 lots, proposed to be 26 feet wide. Roller Coaster Road is a county gravel road. The on-site road is proposed to be, again, paved to 26 feet. At present, it's unnamed, so unfortunately, I have to call it the unnamed cul-de-sac road on-site. But though it is proposed as a privately owned and maintained road, the application does indicate that this road will allow public access onto the site for these industrial lots. And I would also note that at this width of 26 feet paved for that cul-de-sac, parking is not permitted on either side of that road. So curb and gutter is required along that on-site cul-de-sac road on both sides. The subdivider has requested a variance, and staff recommends support of that variance, especially since there are no comprehensive drainage facilities, as you saw in the photo of Roller Coaster Road, nor on any other properties in the area, and really until there's more comprehensive planning for drainage disposal, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to require curb and gutter. And as I'll mention later with the roads, same goes with the curbs, that a condition of approval has an RSID waiver attached to the subdivisions should we be in a position to initiate an RSID for curb and gutter at this location. This is the proposed road section, and as you can see, it shows no curb and gutter, and instead drainage swales to capture road runoff, and directs that runoff to through the roadside swales to the north and the south of the sides of the road, or ends of the road, I should say, detention basins that will collect that road runoff. So this section is as if you were standing at the end of the cul-de-sac road looking south down across the property to Roller Coaster Road. So this also shows you something I'm going to talk about in a minute, the location of the pedestrian path on the right, which would be the west side of this road, which is the side that does not have any lots on it. And you can see I believe it's a 60-foot right-of-way with the 26-foot wide road, and then a 4-foot integrated pedestrian path over here, as I mentioned, on that west side, that right side of the slide. So Non-motorized facilities are required on both sides of this on-site cul-de-sac road. The subdivider has requested a variance and proposes to increase the paved width of the road from 26 feet to 30 feet. And creating that extra 4 feet, creating a paved pathway. And that pathway is integrated with the road, separated from traffic by reflectors or a rumble strip. The reason this is required is that this property is within what's called the urban service area boundary that's shown in the green outline. And so higher standard of infrastructure is expected within this area, but it's not always appropriate, and that's when you see variance requests. And so thus the recommendation for approval of the curb and gutter request, even though it's in this urban area, we are supporting it given the context of the subdivision. However, staff is recommending only conditional approval of this variance request. And instead, as shown here on this slide, what you would see in red would be the recommended ped walkway, and the green would be the grassy swale, if you will. This
I'm sorry, and this is keeping the 26-foot road, or is this the 30?
This would be a 26-foot wide road. And then the recommendation is for a 7-foot wide grassy swale boulevard area and a 5-foot wide concrete sidewalk.
Got it, okay.
That's what's required by the regulations.
Okay.
And I'm gonna speak to this, and the really the kind of the crux of this whole subdivision is that issue. So, but that recommendation for conditional approval, essentially denying their request and going with some other alternative for this variance, is based on the findings of fact related to the variance request, which concludes that approval of this variance would be contrary to goals in the growth policy for this area. Specifically, the 2019 Missoula County Land Use Element recommends all roads in industrial centers provide non-motorized facilities. On page 47, it states, additional separation for non-motorized facilities such as protected or buffered boulevard sidewalks and enhanced crossings are needed when vehicle speeds and traffic volumes increase. Of course, separating a walkway from a roadway provides area for snow storage and a safer transportation corridor. And the separated walkway from the roadway was supported by both the health department and in more recent conversations with Public Works. In the last several days, I have been working with IMEG to talk to them about their proposal for the walkway on the west side, and they have agreed, and I believe Joe from IMEG will address this afternoon, to move that walkway from the west side to the east side. Still as a 4-foot asphalt path, but they've agreed to move it to the side where the lots will have direct access to it. And so that's a good step. That's great. We're very happy about that. So the remaining issues are surfacing and the separation. So I want to take a minute and talk about this nearby Pontiac subdivision, which was approved by the BCC in 2021. And Dave, there's a reason you don't remember this because you weren't present at the meeting. But I did go back and I listened to the hearing, and I listened to the presentation given by staff and the developer and the discussion. And the subdivider is basing their current walkway variance in the roller coaster subdivision on the approval of this variance in Pontiac last summer. It's the same thing, and in conversations, that's kind of what they've said is, hey, it happened before. We think it's the same situation. We want to ask for the same thing. Last summer, for the Pontiac subdivision, staff did recommend denial of that of that variance. However, based on information presented by the subdivider, the commissioners approved a 4-foot wide integrated path from separated from the driving surface by a rumble strip. That subdivision, as you can probably see there, is an 8-lot subdivision. And so it had a few more lots than what we have right now, the 5 lots. One of the primary reasons identified by the BCC in that hearing for approving the walkway variance was a lack of future connection to the south on this subdivision. It's just not going anywhere. That cul-de-sac is the end of the roads, literally. That is also absolutely the case here, right? It's got a railroad to the north of it. It's not going anywhere. However, there are some key differences and some points to consider when evaluating this variance. The first one is on Pontiac, the drainage from the lots was the drainage from the lots is directed from the lots to the roadside swale. So having a roadside walkway made more sense so that runoff didn't have to go over or under the walkway. It could just go straight to the swale rather than across the walkway. But in this subdivision, oops, wrong way, it appears that the drainage from the lots is being directed to detention basins to the rear of the lots or on the east side. And
So the road's at higher elevation to the west, and then everything drains to the east?
there's variable topography, but I think they're designing, grading it so that it would, that's my read of this, is these 5 little rectangles on the back are identified as detention ponds. And then it's not shown here, but there's a detention pond here at the end of the cul-de-sac and here at the beginning of it, which is to capture that roadside runoff. And so unless there's information I don't have, it seemed to make more sense in this scenario that that roadside swale was more possible here than on Pontiac. And so that's one point to consider. The second point is that, and did I answer your question, Juanita?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Parking, while not permitted by the subdivision regulations or the fire district on a road of this width, 26 feet, it does have the potential to interfere with pedestrians, the pedestrian use of this walkway, especially in the winter when there may be no clear distinction between the road and the walkway. Pontiac was presented as a private road with a gate at the entrance of that road. This road is a privately owned and maintained, but it is also proposed with public access, meaning the public can come in here and use these lots. On Pontiac, the pedestrian walkway, keep going the wrong way, would have 7 curb cuts on that road, interfering to some extent with a walkway. On this one, there will be only 3, as shown here. This one, the ones to lots 3 and 4 is a shared access, and then lot 5 has its own access. And finally, Shane Stack, Public Works, brought to my attention something that I should have been paying attention to earlier, which is meeting ADA, what he called PROAG requirements on this proposed path at a 4-foot width integrated with the road. Does this meet ADA requirements? And his primary goal is to get an RSID waiver to ensure if we don't get an adequate ped walkway now, that we have the RSID waiver to get it later. But the regs require something now. And so he said, well, just make sure whatever you do now meets ADA. So that will be, if you decide to go with staff's recommendation, I will have an amendment to the condition to just insert some language about ADA compliance for a ped walkway. The primary concerns for the subdivider are cost and ease of installation and maintenance of a walkway. With a private road maintenance agreement, as this road is proposed to have, adjoining landowners will have the responsibility to maintain their walkways. And I just have 3 more slides giving you some example walkways so you can kind of envision and imagine what might be able to happen here. So in this Clements Road example, you can see an asphalt walkway separated by what looks to be a 5-foot wide grassy boulevard. The conditions here are quite different than our current subdivision. The speed here is higher, there's more traffic volume, there are other road connections. And so that's something to consider if you are wanting to explore ways to consider the variance request from the subdivider. So given the differences, really what the intent of this slide is to show you what it could look like. And maintenance is often put forward as a reason why we can't do this. These ped walkways that don't get used don't get maintained, but it's the responsibility of the subdivider and then eventually the lot owner adjacent to that walkway to maintain it. In this Montana Highway 135 example, you'll see a differentiated surface, a concrete sidewalk as a ped path with what are called candlestick separators. So if you want to consider a ped walkway integrated with a road surface, I would, at the very least, recommend separation similar to this example with a differentiated road surface and candlesticks that work year-round as a separator, not only when the road is snow-free. Okay, last slide, and then I'll get to the motions for you. So this is a schematic that shows each lot depicted with paving and building and as we talked about earlier, the detention ponds, and then of course the road with the driveway ingress and egress points to each lot. The ICL zoning sets a maximum impervious surface of each lot at 70%. That is reviewed at time of building permit, so I did not review it with this subdivision proposal. This is conceptual, but I am just kind of putting it on record that we will be looking at that later with permits. Fire protection is proposed for each of those structures as a sprinkler system within each building. And staff is recommending approval of the curb and gutter variance, conditional approval of the sidewalk and boulevard variance, and then approval of the subdivision with 12 conditions. And as I said, I'm expecting possible revision to condition number 7 relative to the ped walkways. So I'm prepared for that once you get there. With that, I'll conclude my somewhat lengthy staff report. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are your motions.
Joe, would you like to add anything? Or anyone from IMEG?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to add a few things.
Oops, did I thought I, there we go.
Still there? I know you got to go here in 12 minutes, Juanita. I'll try to be quick.
That's okay. You still have Slotnick and Strohmeyer.
Yeah, Jenny did a great job, so we'll just cut right to it. My name is Joe Dennert, and I work for IMEG office in Missoula. I'm joined by my coworker, Mr. Paul Forsting, and we are here obviously representing the developer fittingly named Roller Coaster Road, LLC. First and foremost, Jenny, thanks for the really thorough presentation. Welcome back. We're happy to have you back as a planner. You have been extremely collaborative, I would say, from the project's inception. And I feel like the presentation kind of teed up the commissioners with enough information to make an informed decision. I definitely want to thank you, too, for the recommendations of approval that were included in your staff report. And you know, as you mentioned, we agree with almost every aspect of the recommendations except for the recommended condition associated with that variance request from the sidewalk and boulevard requirement for both sides of that internal subdivision road. Truth be told, we really just don't believe the sidewalk and boulevard fit with the commercial and industrial purposes being proposed for the subdivision. You know, like Jenny mentioned in her proposal, it's only required because we're in that particular area. And as she mentioned, that is subject to change depending on the proposal. It really doesn't fit with what's being proposed. And when we were originally designing this, you know, we did look, like we do oftentimes, at the comparable design in the area. And we chose to replicate that design that was approved for the Pontiac subdivision directly across the street. The reason we chose to replicate it is because we do believe that that 4-foot integrated ped pathway is an intuitive design, not only for the maintenance reasons for the contemplated uses out here, but also for the proposed uses, because these lots are much larger than the Pontiac subdivision, first off, and they're going to be used exclusively for commercial and industrial purposes. You know, this is going to be vehicle storage that's seen on other properties in the vicinity. You have shadow asphalt right across the street as well for an example of kind of what's going to be on these lots. And the fact that the proposed subdivision road really can't connect to any future roadway. It's bound by the railway to the north, and there are no existing ped facilities along the gravel road, roller coaster road to the south. It means that the sidewalk and boulevard would be, sidewalk to nowhere. Additionally, we have seen sidewalks that, if they're not frequently used, it's like the old saying, use it or lose it. They kind of become an eyesore. They can become overgrown with vegetation. And although it is the responsibility, like Jenny mentioned, for the owners of the lot to maintain, it just is one of those things where if it's not regularly used, it ends up fading back into the earth, so to say. In an effort to better align with the county's recommended condition, we do believe that moving the pedestrian pathway to that eastern edge is a good middle ground option here. We are fine imagining that rubble strip along with reflectors and appropriate designation on the asphalt for the ped pathway, and assume that would be required and reviewed by County Public Works in order to fully delineate where that road ends and where the ped pathway would begin. All this being said, I do think Jenny did a phenomenal job in her presentation, and I really don't have much else to share. I hope you consider revising the recommended condition associated with the variance to better align not only with the proposed uses out here, but also with the developer's preference. And Paul and I are here if you have any questions or have anything that you want further consideration on. We have, plenty of information to provide. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joe. I do have a question. So it's the same pavement structure, a rumble strip, and then when you say reflectors, what kind of reflectors were you thinking? Like the ones we saw on Jenny's photo, would you call it candlestick,
Yeah.
or what kind of
Yeah.
reflectors?
Well, that's a great question. And in Jenny's photo, she was talking about the candlesticks being there, during the winter. I don't know how much use that ped pathway would have in the winter walking back and forth. Obviously, it's there, but I don't really feel like candlesticks would be necessary in this case. It's more so reflectors notifying vehicles, commercial vehicles that are going in and out of the roadway, lower to the ground, almost like you would imagine a reflector in the center line of a road, just delineating that pathway.
And then so if you're plowing, then does a plow catch on? Does a plow catch on the reflectors, or how does that work? They can plow over, or
they might catch. I don't believe they catch. Plows run these roads all winter long, but if that's ever a case, we're willing to entertain design questions for this approved ped pathway with Public Works to make sure we're adhering to everything that, Jenny was talking about, ADA standards and all of those regulations, but also something that works for maintenance, for snow plows, to make sure that vehicles aren't just going to drive onto the surface not really knowing a ped pathway is there. I think the intent of the reflectors and the rumble strip is to notify vehicles, hey, this is a ped pathway, not for driving on. It's for pedestrian use.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is there any other questions or comments in the room or online? Chris? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
So, Jenny, I'm trying to envision it. It's a little bit frustrating if we have regulations and then we're consistently granting variances, which makes a bit of a mockery of the regulations in the first place, which begs the question, why have the regulation if we can't envision any situation where it would actually make sense? And I can see both sides here. I'm trying to envision who is going to be out here driving down the road and visiting these particular businesses, and hold that thought, Jenny. Joe, so tell us what sort of businesses are going to be out here? What do you envision being on these lots?
That's a great question. The developer really envisions these lots mimicking what can be seen in the vicinity. Actually, it might be better if I can share my screen. Oh, I don't know. Let's see if I have that capability. No, I don't. It might be hard to give me that.
Yep.
I think Violet's hooking you up.
You've got it now.
Oh, okay. I got you. Okay, let me see if I can share something here. Maybe give it a second, Violet. If it doesn't work, let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, so this is just an image I pulled from Shadow Asphalt. If you look basically catty corner from our site to the southeast across Roller Coaster, you have Shadow Asphalt there. And here in this area of the photo, you have this larger commercial building, quote unquote, and then parking of fleet vehicles, parking of construction equipment, storage of industrial uses. You know, that's really what the developer envisions out here. Maybe some shop space to allow for coordination of activities that these particular entities are involved in. But this is focused from the developer's perspective on workforce, industrial, and commercial activities. This isn't, you know, a place for a coffee shop to pop up to be associated with the business on site. You know, this is strictly focused on workforce capabilities as a staging point for their vehicles, for the employees to coordinate for jobs out of their business on site.
Okay.
And, you know, I do think that it's worth mentioning here that, Dave, you hit the nail on the head. These regulations try to be a blanket, and the only reason we're subject to these regulations is because we're in that service boundary, that urban area per the regs. And that blanket just doesn't really, you know, that one size fits all approach is going to continue creating situations like this where you have a fully contemplated, you know, commercial and an industrial subdivision being proposed where you don't typically see a sidewalk or the requirement for a boulevard, because it doesn't really make sense with what's going to be coming in and out with commercial vehicles constantly driving over it. You know, it makes a lot more sense to have a single paved surface that's a bit more durable.
So I guess here's my observation, or at least the conundrum I have, is that based on that description, you have businesses to which folks will be accessing them. You have no on-street parking. So I'm trying to envision in what scenario would people actually be walking on either a sidewalk or an asphalt path like this. The only case would probably be if they were going from one of these businesses to another. Again, since there's no on-street parking, you would not have a scenario where people would be farther down the street needing to access the sidewalk to get to a business a few lots down. So there is that. And then I guess also it still begs the question, are there any instances where if we grant this variance today, where we would actually see the need for a concrete boulevard and sidewalk? Jenny?
Yeah, can you, I'm sorry, it might be helpful if we have a visual
Yeah.
of like the whole area so that we can see.
Let's see here. How do I share? Okay.
There's not much pedestrian infrastructure out there because there is not much pedestrian activity, but then what will it be in the future? And
So
we don't want to
and
box
I'm-
ourselves in or.
Well,
yeah.
that's the other thing. I have seen instances, and this might not be a good example of it, but I have been to communities where they've maybe taken a similar approach over time. Development patterns have changed, and then you have an area of town where there's no pedestrian infrastructure, and you find yourself walking in the
Dragging your stroller through the weeds.
yeah, wherever. And- But
So-
again, this might not be that.
Yeah.
And I've enlarged this so I can show you a couple of things. So disregard that place marker. I guess the first thing I would point out is when you asked Joe about the uses and he brought up shadow excavating or something, concrete or whatever it was, in the areas across the railroad, those are properties that were not in a subdivision, and that's why they look the way they do. They had no requirements for curb and gutter. There's totally laid down access across the entire frontage of a property. And while the uses may be similar, the development is going to look different because of the subdivision requirements for driveway access points, controlling that access. All right. And in this situation, as I pointed out, let me go to this other one, that they're within, let's see here, within this urban area. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that kind of infrastructure development, curb, gutter, sidewalk, all of that out in this area. But to be consistent with our regulations and past recommendations, staff recommendation on this is to follow the regulations. Leaving it to you as in the presentation, giving you information to make a decision, an informed decision that maybe that's overkill here.
And Jenny,
Yes,
Jenny,
Joe.
commissioners, if
comment at this point.
sorry,
Sorry, Josh.
Josh,
What?
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no worries. It's hard to be off site. I appreciate what everyone is saying and thinking about what you were saying, Dave, around regulations and kind of the reason for them. And I'm also thinking of the reason for us, and that I feel like part of our job is to appreciate context.
Yep.
And that no regulation can be okay in all situations. That I don't feel like we would be devaluing the essence of regulation in and of itself if we grant a variance, if we're doing so in recognition of a specific context.
Whoa. I just wanted to put a point on that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And if there is no on-street parking, there's no reason for public transit to be coming here. If all of the work sites have parking as part of their lots, there's going to be super limited walking here. And given it's such an industrial area, it's hard for me to imagine, but it certainly could, but it'd be decades in the future that this transforms into a more residential area. And I would hope that the people in our shoes then would push for more pedestrian friendly infrastructure. But I'm personally okay with the compromise, that not the boulevard, but with reflectors, a demarcated spot where you could walk, but not the full blown. It needs to look like the slant streets kind of thing.
Dave, and then I guess Joan.
Yeah, I guess my only point would be, as we think about updating our subdivision regulations in the future, we might, I just want us to think hard about those situations where this would be appropriate, and maybe the level of infrastructure such as curb, sidewalk, gutter, and boulevard. Because again, if in these industrial areas we are consistently finding ourselves granting variances, and maybe for very good reasons, then it would be better to adjust the regulations so that we're not in a position of just consistently granting variances, and then the variances, the more likely situation would be, well, I would want the variances to be the exception to the rule, not the rule themselves, basically.
I mean, do we need different curb, gutter, boulevard, sidewalk regulations in areas that are entirely industrial than we do in areas that have more mixed use?
Yeah, I think that is the question.
But then it's also, I mean, this particular one has that railroad, to the north, the dead ends, and then the, roller coaster road isn't a pedestrian road. So this is unique. So I would hate to say, blanket all industrial areas. I mean, this is just a unique piece of property within an industrial area that I feel like we can. Ooh, I know comms hates threads the needle, but thread the needle on.
One, I think your observations are dead on there, and that I think that's kind of part of our role here, is to recognize context and be thoughtful about it, and that not every spot is the same, and we create these regulations so we can see our values put into practice in real life. But some places we don't need to do that. They don't need to be built out to their fullest because the context isn't right.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, Joe, you were trying to say something earlier.
You guys said it all.
Okay.
There's nothing that I need to add.
And
oh, Shane Stack, you have your hand up.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just want to, I guess, throw this out too. Somewhat on not necessarily on the context of the path, but just on the context of Public Works is planning to do some work out here. Our goal is to slowly work down Roller Coaster Road and eventually have it paved. And working with these first few properties off of Highway 10, I think what we've witnessed is there may be some old surveys out there, and Joe, I guess I would just tell you to make sure and reach out to Steve Nide, and make sure that what you have platted out there is actually outside of that existing right of way. And it's off the topic of the pedestrian, and I apologize for that, but I also wanted to get that in before I get out of here. I think you guys are on the right track.
Thank you so much for that, Shane. We absolutely will.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, Jenny, just refresh my memory. So as part of the approval for this, there would be a future waiver of protest for an RSID,
Yes.
such that if conditions changed out here for whatever reason and it made sense to have curb, gutter, or sidewalk, that could happen.
Yes, that's in condition 3.
Okay.
That's great.
Oh, John Hart.
Commissioners, I don't want to get in the way of where you're headed, but I just do want to point out that those waivers are good for 20 years. And that is a long horizon, but they do have a shelf life, and they're 20 years.
And John, after today, are those waivers ever revisited?
What do you mean by revisited? They're on the plat. They would run with the land. Anybody who purchased a lot in this subdivision would be subject to them, but that shelf life starts on the day that plat is filed and runs for 20 years.
Okay. There's not an occasion when we would look at them again, not unless somebody wanted to change the planning of how this area was, I imagine.
Exactly. We would not have an opportunity to revisit these and sort of start the clock running again unless there was a wholesale land use proposal before us that would allow us to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Jenny?
Give you some time to contemplate, and as you're contemplating, I just want to ask 2 questions, kind of guide or gauge where I think you're going. First is, are you comfortable with a minimum 4-foot wide? I'm going to add in language about meeting ADA, which may require more, but I want to have a minimum in the condition. So first is 4 foot, your minimum acceptable. And second would be separated from the roadway by their proposal for integrated in the horizontal surface of the roadway, a rumble strip or reflectors, or do you want something more 3-dimensional?
I'm okay with the rumble strip reflector.
Same.
Sure.
Are you crafting a motion for us?
I'm crafting a revision to condition number 7. So would you?
Okay.
Sorry.
Unless, Josh, or Dave, do you have?
I've got no other questions.
I'm good.
So
I help
am I still
Jenny-
sharing? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still sharing my screen. And actually, I want to keep sharing it because I want to go to the motions for you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
I know you need to get going. Okay, so there are the motions. When you get to motion number 3, if you want to revise condition 7 about the ped walkways, which right now reads, plans for installation of 5-foot wide asphalt walkway and 7-foot wide boulevards on the east side. Yeah, okay. East side of the unnamed cul-de-sac road shall be reviewed and approved by Public Works. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to change that sentence for you, given with your guidance.
Okay. Well, do you guys want to take this one at a time and then we can wordsmith number 2?
Yeah, sure. That would be fine. And I guess my one other question, as far as the minimum 4 feet, it's minimum predicated on if through looking at ADA, it requires more than 4 feet.
Right.
Whatever ADA's minimum
Right.
is. Correct.
Yeah.
And I also notice I'm going to need to help you with the wording on motion number 2. It's going to be different.
Okay. So is motion number 1 solid?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion number 1 is ready to go.
Okay, I would move that the variance request from Missoula County Subdivision Regulations, Section 3.4.7.3, requiring installation of curb and gutter along the unnamed cul-de-sac road be approved based on the findings of fact in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, wait, suddenly I'm getting thrown off. Installation of curb and gutter along the sidewalk. I mean, sorry, yep, okay. Be approved. Yes. Just need to work through that. All in favor? Aye.
Okay, and requiring installation.
Yeah, so do you need to fix some language on
Actually,
number 2?
no, I think motion number 2 works because then we're going to change the conditional of the conditionally approved in the next motion. So it works.
Okay, then I would move that the variance request from table 3.4.9.4 and from section 3.4.9.4D2 requiring installation of 5-foot wide pedestrian walkways with 7-foot wide landscape boulevards along the unnamed cul-de-sac road be conditionally approved based on the findings of fact in the staff report and subject to the required conditions of approval.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, now we get to the conditions?
Okay, so you would make motion number 3, and the order this happens, I'm used to, after we revise the condition, you would make motion number 3 to say as amended. And as amended would be a revision to condition number 7, and so your first motion might be, you move to amend condition number 7 to read, plans for an installation of a minimum 4-foot wide asphalt walkway integrated with the cul-de-sac road and separated by reflectors or rumble strip in compliance with ADA and PROAG requirements, that's all ADA, along the east side of the unnamed cul-de-sac road shall be reviewed and approved by County Public Works prior to final plat approval. The walkway extension, delete that sentence. Or the walkway shall extend to the common boundaries of lots 1 and 2. Yep. And then section 11 shall be amended to acknowledge the required dimensions. Don't need to read that again.
Could you read that one more time? And then I'd like to hear if if you're good with that language.
Okay. Plans for an installation of a 4-foot wide asphalt walkway integrated with the cul-de-sac road and separated by reflectors or a rumble strip in compliance with ADA and PROAG requirements along the east side of the unnamed cul-de-sac road shall be reviewed and approved by County Public Works prior to final plat approval. The walkway shall extend from the common boundary of lots 1 and 2 to Roller Coaster Road. Section 11 of the covenants shall be amended to acknowledge these required dimensions.
Joe?
I'm here, and thank you for reading that, Jenny. I'm contemplating the implications. Currently, it sounds good. I'm just thinking of that last sentence, the shared common boundary between lot 1 and 2, because now we're looping around the other end of the cul-de-sac.
No, it just takes it, am I sharing my screen?
I'm just making sure.
It takes it from Roller Coaster Road up and around the cul-de-sac to the boundary of lots 1 and 2.
Yes, yes. I'm okay with that language.
Okay.
Okay, I'd move that we approve what Jenny just read.
Dave, I was ready to totally be impressed and have you recite that from memory. Just be in awe. But yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Jenny, for working on the fly.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny.
Sure.
Okay,
So I guess number.
Then you
Oh,
make
goodness, sorry.
Okay, so
Yep,
I
the
would
main
move
motion
that, I
number
would
3.
move that the roller coaster subdivision be approved based on the findings of fact and subject to the recommended conditions of approval as amended.
Second that.
Any further discussion or comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, Joe, you inhaled there. Do you need to? Okay.
We can deny it if you'd like.
No.
Okay.
Who wants to go backwards?
Okay.
Okay. We're done.
Thank you. We're done. Other business, we're adjourned.
All right.
Okay, thanks all.
Safe drive.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Oh, there's a Russell Anderson. Russell Anderson.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm Russell Anderson, living in the Target Range area. And I received a postcard the other day, just on Saturday, from the parks, trails, and open lands regarding putting a lock on the gate on the east end of Rose Crest Park, formerly Roseland Park, as it was originally identified. This seems to be rather straightforward and arbitrary to begin with, it without consideration of those who border this property. There's 35 properties that border the Rosecrest Park. Out of that, almost half of them live on a bench where the majority of the yard is in the backyard, and which would be down in access to the Rosecrest Park. If the gate was to be locked, we would be surely hampered by being able to get in for emergency services, septic systems, and a variety of other reasons. They're talking about putting a lock on it. I want to have a discussion with them and notify the people who are a part of this borderland to be a part of that discussion. I think that's necessary before that lock is put on the gate. I'm looking for help as much as anything else right now.
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, I think well, suffice it to say, we've heard from plenty of folks the past few days on this topic, and we will be taking a hard look as far as what options there might be to not have such an abrupt change as you pointed out. So that discussion is happening right now, and we will make sure that our parks, trails, and open land staff are aware of your comments today.
I appreciate that. Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll be adjourned.